they would be somewhat elongated.
The Pulitzer Prize winning anthropologist, Ernest Becker, proposed something controversial and compelling, which has led to an active area of research called terror management theory. And he proposed that what truly motivates our actions is the fear of death. Unfortunately, not consciously, mainly subconsciously. Every fiber in our being is trying to survive. Just right now, there are trillions of biochemical processes going on that are there to keep this body of this host going. But psychologically speaking, it's too terrifying for us to confront our own death, the true reality of our finality, too terrifying. So instead what we do is we fool ourselves into thinking we can become immortal. And the way that we become immortal is through becoming a hero and leaving a legacy. So the idea is that culturally speaking, there are many different ways of becoming a hero. If you're a female amongst single friends and you get married, you're now a hero in their eyes, right? They want to rock too. They want that, lifetime commitment from their husband too. In academia, there's a progression from PhD to postdoc to lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, professor, emeritus professor, and you can be an emeritus professor at Harvard, So there are ways of becoming a hero in your career. There's a way of becoming a hero in gymnastics, level 1, level 2, up to level 10. Past level 10 to Kohei Uchimura, He's a hero. So there are lots of ways of becoming a hero, and all of those ways are culturally determined. They're totally arbitrary. They have nothing to do with you. So let me read this quote, which I think you're going to love, from The Denial of Death by Ernest Becker. This is from chapter 5.
I love how you very casually say they're totally arbitrary and have nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
That's huge, but very cool that you just play it off.
It is huge. It's huge and obvious, but needs to be said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chapter 5, The Psychoanalyst Kierkegaard. This is page 82. I think you're going to love this quote. The social hero system into which we are born marks out paths for our heroism, paths to which we conform, to which we shape ourselves so that we can please others and become what they expect us to be. So instead of working on what makes us truly unique, we gradually cover it up and forget it, becoming purely externally driven. This is the mic drop moment. Playing successfully the standardized hero game into which we happen to fall by accident. So the way that you're trying to become a hero in getting that promotion or getting that car or getting that girl or whatever it might be, you're trying to become a hero in a way that is culturally determined, has nothing to do with you. I mean, just imagine how long it would take for you to, there are surviving hunter-gatherer societies in the world. Imagine how long it would take for you to explain to this dude why you need to be part of middle management at IBM. I mean, so clearly culturally determined. And so what motivates us, we feel that we're choosing it. I want to have my wedding my way. But the fact that you want to get married at all, you're playing the wedding game. That is totally culturally determined and has nothing to do with you. It was around before you were born. You were dropped into it, thrust into it, not by your will. And so it feels that we have a certain degree of autonomy, but we're playing in a game. We might think that we're playing by our own rules, but we're playing within a game that's totally culturally and arbitrarily determined. It has nothing to do with you. And so you might ask, well, how is it that we escape? That doesn't sound very nice.
Games can be fun.
And there's nothing wrong with trying to become a level 10 gymnast, is there? Because there's a wonderful, there's a progress that happens and you grow as a person in doing that. you know?
Yeah.
The point is that a lot of the games that we play are not played consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the games we play
Yeah.
are not played consciously. And I suppose that the key idea here, the revolutionary idea, is that this is the reason that it motivates us so is because we want to delude ourselves into thinking that the finality of death isn't a reality.
Mm. Yeah, all about the legacy and being remembered.
Yeah.
Somehow that keeps you.
Yeah. I think it was Alex Hormozy talking about how, like, you know, the Queen is one of the most powerful women that's ever lived and amassed this incredible amount of wealth, blah, blah, blah. And yet you've probably never thought about her once today. And she only died like last year or something.
I have now.
Right. But you understand my point.
Yeah.
That you can be this incredibly powerful and important person and you're forgotten rather quickly. So I don't know if legacy is something to aim for.
Yeah. That's why I guess things I'm thinking of is like how scientific discoveries and that and particles and that are named after certain people sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And even with gymnastics, certain skills, if you're the first person to do a skill that gets named after you.
Yes.
So in that way, every time someone's talking about the Diamondov or Kovacs, like they're referring to someone in a way. But I guess you don't really think about that person. Well, sometimes I do, but yeah. And so are we saying that it's interesting to be aware of this? And is it to be then aware of that and then make your decisions, just being more self-aware, basically?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can become, you know, so on the next page, actually, he talks about how it can be disturbing to think about breaking the social order. Very, very difficult to decide that, you know, I don't want to get married or don't want to have kids, or there are more extreme ways of not playing the game. And it's difficult to do that because there is a social pressure not to do that. Yeah.
Why would you not want to play the game?
I think to a certain extent, some parts of the game are okay. It's just the ones that you don't know that you're playing. You know, so for instance, you know, if you're trying to get a job, you know, middle management at IBM or whatever it might be, not saying that that's not your, you know, that might be the way that you're actually expressing your uniqueness, you know, that's possible. But oftentimes we go into a job that, you know, we don't like, we're spending time with colleagues that we don't respect. We're carrying out these monotonous actions in order to get a paycheck, in order to, you know, live in a place that you might not even, who cares, you know, do you even like this apartment? Do you like this job? Do you really need that promotion? Do you want it? Do you feel that that's in alignment with who you truly are?
Yeah. And
do you think, so I can go back to, he has an amazing quote about maybe what you should be aiming for, but there's this idea that you want to cultivate your interiority. You want to cultivate what's really unique about yourself. And that's not simply selfish. Like, that'll be incredibly fulfilling for you, but it'll also just be that much better for the world. Because you're cultivating what makes you special and what you can uniquely bring to the table. And oftentimes in our careers, we don't necessarily do that. As he says, we cover it over and become like everybody else.
Yeah. So it's more about intentionally choosing the games you want to play, as opposed to without considering it, doing what you feel is expected of you, even if that's at odds with your values or interests and
And I guess the point that I'm making is that happens quite insidiously. It happens very gradually. And then what happens is that you now think, oh, I always did want to be a lawyer. You know, it becomes so ingrained in you that you now think that it actually is an authentic motive.
Yeah.
But so it's like, maybe if you find that everybody around you has the same goals as you, it's time to pause and reflect.
Yeah. Yeah. And in general, I'd say constant reflection is necessary. Hey? Like not incessant, but if I personally probably go periods without reflecting, if it becomes a long period, I can get off course, you know, or like realize, I'm not probably spending too much time in this area, you know. So yeah, because things change as well, of course, and your priorities and that will shift as well, but only when you consciously. Often, I mean, maybe sometimes it'll be obvious, but yeah. And maybe on that, we were talking about morning pages, which is Nick will give you a better. I'll let you give a quick rundown on what morning pages is.
Yeah, so it comes from a book called The Artist's Way, and the basic idea. Well, her idea is about getting to the muse. So getting to a place where your inner, there's this belief that everybody's kind of like has this creative spirit within them, the muse, that is there and potentially covered up. And a way to get to that is by simply writing down, and I think it's 3 pages, 3 long form A4 pages. You write them by hand, and you do this first thing in the morning. And the idea is that it kind of just gets you out of this incessant, you know, droning ways of thinking. What are my problems for today? You know, what have I got on the agenda? All those things, just get them out and get into this place where you're writing without thinking, and see if you can kind of sustain that.
And that's because 3 pages is a significant amount, and so most of your problems will probably be written out on the first page, say?
I suppose. I mean, I did morning pages for a while, and then sometimes I wrote more than 3, and sometimes I would write less.
Yeah.
And nowadays I just use it when I feel that I need it.
And then that makes me think it's a tool, but don't let your tools control you.
Yes.
Right? Where if you were like, I have to write 3 pages, and you were forcing yourself.
But, you know, we talked about this though, Lockie, because you mentioned that it was difficult for you in the beginning. And then I told you about what I had written the previous day, which was, I don't want to do this. This is so fucking ridiculous. It's so funny how, you know, you can get to a place of creativity through frustration and anger. Mm-hmm. If you simply allow yourself, and I feel that this is one of the things that I learned about mindfulness is just allowing. Don't judge, just allow. And similarly with this writing practice, I mean, if you're frustrated, there's nothing bad with being frustrated. You label it so. So just allow it. The reality is you're frustrated. So let's just write about being frustrated.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, you write to a place where, in my experience, there's something deep is on the other end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because I've done it too. Nick and I spoke about it maybe 2 years ago or something, and it was very insightful. It was funny. It's probably never something I feel like doing, but it would make things quite clear in some respects to me. Yeah, as in, I really should do that thing today because, you know, I've put it off a couple of days, or clearly it's just an important thing to do. But then we were also talking about not needing to do it every single day, and there being better periods of your life to do it.
Sure.
Do you want to talk a bit about that? Where depending on how busy you are, or if you're in a state of change.
Yeah, so this came from a book called Insight by Tasha Eurich, I think is her name. And so the book is about how to gain self-insight. And to my mind, there are kind of 3 important ways of getting there. One of them is meditation or mindfulness. There are lots of different ways of meditating. But one way is to simply observe your thoughts. Another way is psychotherapy, which can be helpful. And then a third way is journaling. Turns out journaling is an excellent way of gaining self-awareness, but there are good ways to journal and there are bad ways to journal. One bad way of journaling is to ruminate. You know, you talk about your problems and then you go around circles, not getting anywhere important or useful. And so if you do this every day, you now convince yourself that the world is bad, that your life circumstances are horrible and inescapable. It's kind of like a learned helplessness thing that can occur. So it turns out that the best journalers journal when they're going through periods of transition. Now, what I would say is that for me personally, it was important that I had a period of like intense uptake where I did it for quite a while. And actually, the first time I started journaling was right after there was a Stoic conference in Athens. The first time the Stoic Con had been in Athens. And
so cool you went to that, man.
I'm really happy that I went. It was funny because I was doing my PhD in medical physics at the time. I said to my boss, can I go to Athens? I want to go to a conference. He's like, what on? I was like, philosophy. And he was like, yeah. So he gave me the time off, but it was just hilarious that I went to this conference across the world that had to do with philosophy. But one of the things that kept coming up amongst people there was, first of all, they all talked about how important the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius was for them. A lot of them talked about that. And a lot of them talked about how you need to get the right translation. And so I remember reading the Penguin translation of the Meditations and just being like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
And it really turned me off Marcus.
Yeah.
Then I read the Gregory Hayes translation that everybody had kind of had suggested. When I got back to Sydney, I bought a copy of it, and it really was an incredibly different experience. So that was one of the things that they had mentioned at StoicCon. And then the second thing was, a lot of them said what they did was they journaled in the way that Marcus journaled. And oftentimes what they would do is they would take a quote from the Meditations, think about it, write it in their own words, and then try and live it. So that is actually the way that I started to journal, which is that when I got back from Athens, I read that translation of the Meditations in 2 days. And I went through and highlighted.
It's a lot of knowledge in 2 days.
Well, it's actually a rather short book, but yeah, it is a lot of insight.
It's dense there, right? Yeah.
I mean, I had read it before, so it was kind of like rereading it, just in a great translation. And so what I had done was I highlight all of the things that kind of stood out to me. And then what I did was for a year, I would go through and look at a passage that I'd highlight. I'd write it in my own words, think about it, and then try and live it. So that might take 2 pages to kind of explain what it is, or maybe just a page or half a page. You know, I didn't know about morning pages in those days. And I did that for a year, and it was very transformational in just helping me think in kind of a more stoic way.
That's so cool. So you'd write out a particular idea. Yeah. However long it takes you to write in your own words. Yep. And then you try and live that. Yep. And whenever the opportunity arose in your daily life. Yep. That's really cool. That sounds like a fun exercise. And it was fun, yeah. Then once you'd live that out, then you'd the next day write out a different.
Yep, different one. And the idea, I think, is that, and the thing is, like, there were more days in the year than there were quotes that I picked up from the book. So I would go back over, right? So it's not as if I thought, okay, I learned that, now I'm done with it. And I actually still often will go back to the Meditations in my journaling, often. So yeah, the idea is that I think it's important that you focus on one thing per day, try and get it done. And then hopefully it kind of lingers and it carries over. But also, I'm just, I'm imperfect. So then I assume that I'll lose it, or I won't have done it properly. And then, the beautiful thing is you come back to the quote, it's different. It's different now. Yeah. You're a different person. Yeah. It's different. And so I did that for a year and found that to be very useful. And then, I don't know how I came across morning pages, but the morning pages were very different for me. Because it was just whatever is in my head and not to judge it. I think the first time around, journaling with Marcus, it was quite goal-oriented or at least prescriptive. This is how you should be living kind of thing. Then with morning pages, it was just like, what's here? What's going on in my head? No judgment. Let's just see what's here.
Did you find the no judgment part tricky? Because it almost seems unnatural in that the norm of society perhaps is to judge maybe not everything, but a lot of things, right? Even your own thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It wasn't because I had 7 years of meditation prior. I had practiced that. So not necessarily. It was different, but not difficult.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting insight. I think for a lot of people, they may not have considered if they're judging their thoughts and maybe even they're judging things that need not be judged and instead just accepted. You know, probably for a lot of things, it's just acceptance of the thing. And I find it. I've got a friend. He's very refreshing in the sense that he'll even be aware that he has a value of X, and then in some instances he will do something that contravenes that value. Yeah. And it's refreshing that he says, I know that's stupid, but that's just what I do sometimes. And he's like, I know it doesn't align, but it's just cool because most people would deny it or try to reason, because in this case, da-da-da-da-da, and try to make it a thing. The fact that he just addresses with I guess it has less judgment. You know what I mean? It's somehow refreshing. It's interesting, and it makes me like him more because it just feels like he's honest. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Deep, like at the end of the day, it's just being honest. And that way, he could, I guess, if the thing was a problem, he could change, as opposed to if he was making up a story to explain, oh well, this happened in this case. Then it seems less likely to be something that you could change later, because you'll, so. Mm-hmm.
As you know, when I was in Athens, I did a 7-day water-only fast, and
what a great trip you had, man! It's so cool. The same one that you were,
at the Stoic conference, and so you have all these, apparent insights. Fasting can be, I wouldn't say psychedelic, but it's definitely you're in a different mental state. And I sometimes felt that I was having these great insights. So I would write them down, and most of them were fucking nonsense. It's just the low blood sugar moron. But I did have one thing that I'm not sure was totally profound, but is just interesting, which was take the world seriously, but don't take yourself so seriously. So that maybe there are prescriptive things out there of like live a stoic life and all of those things. But you will fail because you're just a chimp. And if you read, even if you read the meditations, he's talking about how he fails a lot of this stuff. Like, come on, man, why are you being so selfish? You know that justice is a virtue. Why are you doing all this stuff for yourself when you should be thinking about other people? And that's, again, it's like with your friend, you said that it makes you like him. I think that's why the meditations are so like Marcus is so likable. Because he has these incredible ideals, but he's not living up to them some of the time. He seems like quite a laudable person.
Interesting that you say, come on, you're being selfish. Because that was something I realized, and I'm sure we were talking about it, that being selfish isn't always a negative thing. And again, I think often it's a negative label.
Yep.
When it need not be. It can just be. It need not be. That's just how it is.
Yeah.
And then further to that, I think there's times when definitely being selfish.
Yeah.
It's funny even saying it. I feel like I'm saying a negative thing.
Yeah.
But in times being selfish is actually the right thing to do, and because ultimately it just means focused on oneself, right? Mm-hmm. Which many times would be for the greater good. Because like if you're living completely selflessly, at a certain point perhaps you do nothing for yourself, and hence you can't contribute anything. So
two things, man. First, it reminds me about how with Buddhist meditation, one of the reasons that you would do that is for the benefit of all beings, and not just yourself. That there's this idea that becoming an enlightened person, and everybody has the potential for Buddhahood within them, but becoming an enlightened person is for the benefit of all beings. So you might ask, how is that? And maybe there's some metaphysics that we don't want to go into, but if you're if you're an equanimous, calm, peaceful person, just think about how that has an effect on everybody. When I came over here on the bus driver was one of those people, was so jolly, and it just, I think that it has an impact on kind of the emotional tone of the bus. When I got on, I was like, hey, good morning, man.
Yeah.
And I think that, as opposed to maybe another bus driver that's not so much like that, it has an impact. So first of all, I think that, selfish, again, doesn't necessarily have to mean zero sum, I'm taking, therefore you're getting less. And also, I think that when we do things that are truly fulfilling for us, oftentimes we do a better job. Just think about the person that's doing their job because they feel that they're fulfilling their personal, there's something within this job that it feels like I was meant to do this. And I feel that I'm fulfilling my purpose, and I feel that I love what I do. Just think about how more effective that person is in being productive in whatever they're doing versus the person that's not doing it out of self-interest. They feel that they're sacrificing. They're taking, this job is taking my time. It's taking my attention. Yeah. It's taking my life from me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is almost selfless.
And even those thoughts are distracting and ultimately not going to necessarily make, it's energy and time thinking about that where it could be applied to the work. I was thinking as well, recently you went into the cave and you were like, we didn't communicate for maybe 6 months, maybe more. And it was funny because I really wanted to talk to you in that time, but I respected that, I knew that you were doing something. And maybe you could see that as selfish on your part, but I really like it because, all I could ultimately think was like, this is cool. Like Nick's he's like processing something or whatever he's doing, it's intentional, and I'm sure there's a good reason for it. So I'm glad he's doing that. I'm excited to, hopefully, when he comes out, I can talk to him and so that's another thing. Maybe when people are being selfish, again, I think that the norm might be to think, that's not a becoming quality. Like that's maybe not someone I want to be friends with or something. Yeah. But really, it could be the opposite. Where again, because I think in your case it was, and feel free we can chat about that period. But I love the intentionality, and I'm sure like the intensity behind it. And it's probably definitely not the easiest way to live in that respect. And even like for athletes in that, I think you have to be selfish to be an extremely high level athlete, right? Yeah. But that's another thing I was thinking as we were talking about this. Maybe selfish is only a bad thing if you're thinking really low level about it. But if you think deeper about it, and like you said, how for society, then it could be a positive, depending on what the thing is. But again, I would say the athlete that's being selfish to get to be incredible. I'll use Uchimura as an example. It's funny. I have immense respect, and I do not think he's selfish at all. But let's just say he was very selfish to get to where he got to. It's definitely worth it because he's inspired so many people, and he's now like this icon, like a beacon. He just gives me really excitement and motivation, and I'm sure for a lot of people. So if you think the big picture there, I see. It's a net positive.
Yeah, one of the things that I was a friend of mine told me about was how if you want to do what's best for everybody, that includes you. That was a big eye opener, because oftentimes when we think about doing what's best for everybody, we do so in an altruistic way that forgets about what's best for you, and it can become quite like you forget about you as an individual. What's the word I'm looking for? Like it can be self-destructive, maybe. So it's important to include yourself in the calculus of what's best for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then in addition to that, you know, with my period of like being quiet, what I found is that everybody that was close to me, that cared about me, respected it and was happy that I did it, you know?
That's cool.
And when I came back, they were just like, and if you want to go back, then go back, you know? Everybody was very supportive. And, you know, what I thought about is like, you know, if somebody...
Even your parents?
Well, maybe not as much. But, you know, here's what I would say, man. In the case that somebody didn't want me to do that, and then said that what I'm doing is selfish, they just want me to do what they want me to do, which I think is selfish.
Yeah.
When you want someone to do something that is more convenient for you, I think that's selfish. And I don't understand.
It's not a bad thing. Let's keep that in mind.
Yes. I don't understand that's a good point. I don't understand, like, I have difficulty understanding when people are mad because other people aren't doing what they want them to do. Why doing it that way, man?
Yeah.
It's their life.
Yeah.
Leave them alone.
Yeah. I have to guess that they, in both the case of your parents, if they wanted you to, oh, this isn't a good idea, Nick, don't do this, or wanting someone to do something a different way, I feel like maybe in those cases, those people might think they have a bigger picture view, and they can see that this is not the best way to get what they think that person is trying to get to. So there's a lot of things there that might be incorrect, right?
Yeah.
They may not indeed have a better big picture view than the person, and they may not understand what that person is actually trying to do. Yeah,
no, because, you know, one of the things that is like one of my biggest pet peeves is unsolicited advice. Get the fuck away. I mean, I didn't ask for your... So what I've actually been saying now...
Does anyone like...
Don't you get unsolicited advice?
Oh, surely. Yeah.
But
that's what I mean. I feel like most of the time it would not be welcome, right? I guess. Oh, I don't know. Maybe if I'm a complete amateur at something, in that case. Yeah.
Right, and someone just comes over and goes...
Although, like, you want to vet that person first. Anyway, go on. What you were going to say? Yeah.
What I've been saying to those people now, because, like, I think in the past it's like you want to be maybe agreeable and, I don't know, you don't want to be confrontational, so you just let them do it. But what I've been saying now is if I wanted your advice, I would have asked for it. Because that's just true.
No, thank you.
I wouldn't say thank you because, you know, I'm not thankful.
Yeah.
That's dishonest. One of the things that I discovered last year when I was in America is that agreeable people are dishonest because they say yes when they mean no. You know, how many people are living lives where they say yes to things when they mean no? And then you might say, well, you know, I'm doing it. It's selfish. You know, of course there are certain things I want to say no to, but I say yes anyway. And so what does that mean? Well, let's just do an analysis of that. You know, if you're, you know, doing something for a person, let's say it's a friend, you say yes to a certain thing, you want to say no, but you say yes anyway.
Because you feel obligated, or
because you feel obligated. That's a good point.
Let them down or upset them, or
yeah, obligated is a good word. We should talk about that later. But let's say that you do something out of a sense of obligation. Well, now you're living it. You've got a dishonest relationship with that person. That person does not have a relationship with you. That person has a relationship with the person that you think you need to be in order to keep that relationship alive. That's not who you are.
Yeah.
And
that's not a foundation for a friendship.
Yeah. I mean...
It's the tricky thing is because these things can be so subtle, right?
Exactly.
And
insidious.
And so it takes discipline and self-awareness to...
Yes.
And also like tactfulness, and, you know, because you could reject something in a really rude way, which obviously is not a becoming way.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, no. So it just means that you're having a dishonest relationship with that person. So then you have to think, you know, what happens if I'm bring my honest self to the table and don't do things that I think that I need to do out of a sense of obligation. Why would you want to be around somebody that obligates you into being inauthentic? Why? What are you getting out of that relationship that is so important that you're happy to live an inauthentic, dishonest life?
I think for some people, they may think that person is where I want to be, so I need to change myself and maybe do things that I don't naturally think I should do or want to do to get there, maybe? What do you think?
There's a difference between doing things out of, like, sometimes you don't want to go to the gym, but you do it anyway. Mm-hmm. That's different to doing something out of a sense of obligation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess we need to be very clear on what we mean by obligation. Because I would say I feel obligated to train because I want to achieve these things. But that's not what we mean by, I suppose more in the sense of when it contradicts your values deeply, right?
I would say externally imposed. When it becomes from you, I don't feel obligated to do things that I've said that I was going to do. I feel that I need discipline. That's different to me than obligation.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess obligation is like...
you're going to let somebody else down.
Or it's just you have to do the thing no matter what. Especially without your own natural...
exactly.
Yeah. I should look it up on Google.
Doesn't come from within.
Yeah.
It's imposed from without.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, maybe goes to a couple of sentences before the quote that I talked about with Becca. He asks the question, what is one's true talent, his gift, his authentic vocation? In what way is one truly unique, and how can he express this uniqueness, give it form, dedicate it to something beyond himself, to enrich both himself and mankind with the peculiar quality of his talent? So what do you have to do in order to figure out what's something that is, inside, that is your inner secret, that's what he calls it, or is it being imposed on the outside? And so he says, there are people who try to cultivate their interiority, base their pride on something deeper and inner, create a distance between themselves and the average person. And there's a special name for somebody who cultivates his interiority: introvert. He enjoys solitude, withdraws periodically to reflect. Yeah. So, I feel...
But that said, it's not like extroverts can't reflect.
No, Kierkegaard was using the word introvert in a certain way.
Yeah.
It's not the introvert we know. I mean, he was talking in the 19th century, so...
Oh, damn. Yeah.
It's not the introversion we know now. And actually, so not to keep quoting things, but there is another quote from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who's the guy who came up with flow, the optimal psychological experience of flow. And he says, to overcome the anxieties and depressions of contemporary life, individuals must become independent of the social environment to the degree that they no longer respond exclusively in terms of its rewards and punishments. To achieve such autonomy, a person has to learn to provide rewards to herself. She has to develop the ability to find enjoyment and purpose regardless of external outcomes. So I think an important word here in that quote is exclusively. You're no longer exclusively responding to your social environment and to external cues. And he says that in order to do that, you have to come up with internal rewards. So I would say that when you feel obligated, you're living in accordance with your social environment. externally imposed demands and punishments. And to break free of that, one has to reward themselves for instance, going to the gym or whatever it might be that's in alignment with what you think is, a good life. And, the reward might just be you feel good about yourself. Self-esteem, You're moving closer to the person that you feel that you should be. Yeah.
What are some other rewards people could have?
Yeah, it's funny, because I feel that you and I don't necessarily set up reward systems for us. We just go, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. I think, to me, probably the reward is I respect myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So important and huge.
Yeah.
So, can you say again the that quote about the internal artist? Is that what it was called from that book?
Internal.
You quoted a book before about cultivating your yourself.
Interiority.
Yeah, perhaps to get the to bring the artist out of yourself.
Oh, you mean the artist's way. I don't have a quote. I don't know what the quote is from her, but there is. I guess Julia Cameron's belief is that internal to all of us, we actually have kind of a spirit. She's quite spiritual about these things, but there is something within us that's divine. That is the muse.
Yeah.
That's creative. That needs to be unleashed.
Yeah. I really, that's beautiful, and I feel that. It makes me think that yes, everyone has that. Sadly, some people probably go through their life not realizing what that thing is.
Most people.
Yeah.
Not some.
Yeah, and it's hard to find as well. I would say it's not obvious for most people.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I think you can feel it though when you're doing something.
Yep.
Because I would say you probably feel it in your research and that, which is interesting because most people wouldn't associate that with art, but I totally see how that can be art.
Yeah.
And same for me with, I guess I've gone from making really basic training videos to higher production quality videos, to telling a bit of a story in those videos, and now making a film.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of enjoying each one more and more,
Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm sort of following a path to somewhere. I don't really know where that is.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's following the natural feeling of, Yeah. So, and I'm sure probably a lot of people have that, hopefully, that journey. But you have to listen to it, right? You can't. And
it's tough.
It's maybe it's not super loud and clear. You got to listen to the subtleties. Yeah.
It's really tough to cultivate your interior life.
Yeah.
This is what we're talking about here is very difficult work.
Yeah.
Naval talks about how it's almost there are social rewards, and what we're talking about is almost anti-social rewards. Because when you become something different to what people want you to be, they go, "Hey man, you're not coming out anymore. How about just one drink? Oh, you're too good for us now. Oh, mates, big boy."
Yeah. One of my friends is popping into your mind as you're saying all that. But it's funny because he would say it all in a funny way. Okay. You know what I mean? So, but
yeah, so it's almost anti-social rewards of look what happened. In my case, I've surrounded myself with people that are supportive, but, it could have been, I can imagine that taking 6 months off to be quiet would have upset some people, if I had made friends with the wrong people. So what we're talking about here is very, very difficult. In fact, in just the page after that quote that in The Denial of Death, he says, it would be so nice to be the self he wants to be, but it might upset his world completely. What we're talking about here is revolutionary from a personal perspective, and it can shun the people. It can shun certain people. I guess what I feel is that those people don't deserve to be in my life anyway.
Or that almost sounds arrogant and negative. I would say they're not the right fit, or
sure,
it's better for everyone. Yeah, to just in that case not be.
Yes.
In each other's life, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I see what you're saying. He says that It sounded like he there was a change he thought he could make, but he's not going to make it, or he's not sure. Is that the case?
Yeah, I don't know if it's unsure or it's just like you can see the chasm between who you are now and listening to this internal voice. And crossing that chasm would mean that you would upset your world. The people around you think you're a thing. They think you're something. And it's so difficult for us to think about letting go of those kinds of relations, especially if it's like your mom. It often is the people that are most close to you. And it's interesting how...
Are you saying letting go of them or doing things you think they will not like?
Well, I think the thing here is that there's a risk that they might want to let you go, or that you might have to let them go. The point is not that it will upset your world. The point is that it could upset your world. And that's a risk that one needs to take.
Yeah. That's crazy. In the sense of just hearing your mum letting you go or you letting her go, that almost feels like, well, you just can't do that because there's this social norm of the closeness. But then I also wonder if, because I like to think with my parents, they're very accepting, and I feel like whatever I tell them I think is a good idea, I'm going to do this, they'd support it, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's cute.
I wonder if you didn't have that, but you were thoughtful enough and clear enough with your communication as to like the deep levels of why you're doing this or that, whilst there might be like the shorter term turmoil, I wonder if long term it will reconcile,
Maybe, I don't know. I guess it's, again, it's like very person specific.
Yeah. I'm an idealist, so I like to think that
that eventually it would go back to
the
positive.
parent may be really upset for a while, but then maybe they'll think about it deeper, and I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
It's different for everyone, of course.
I think so, yeah. So then I guess the question is, in those circumstances where you do think it would cause a rift between you and your parents, what do you do? I think that's actually an incredibly difficult situation to be in. Because one solution to that is to simply pretend around your parents to be who they think you are. So you have to live a double life. Yeah. I think that's actually very common to live a double life, and to kind of change your personality. Sounds exhausting.
Yeah. And then the other thing to do is, I guess there's 3 options. That another option is don't do what you feel you really should, because that way your parents will be happy. And then the third way is to do the thing and take the risk. It's so funny though, because yes, that's very complex and difficult, but I feel like it's really obvious what the right thing to do is. Do you know what I mean? Like, which is, you just have to do what seems to be right to yourself, because otherwise you're being inauthentic to your parents again, and it's like living it's not the truth. I guess if that's not your value, but I feel like everything is better with, ultimately, even if you can't understand it at the time, it seems like. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I could say the answer is obvious. Don't bring dishonor to the family. Right?
I don't know. Not if that's...
This is a taste thing. Yeah. Like, I think at the end of the day, by us reasoning through things, we're never going to get anywhere in terms of, there's a preference about how one might want to live their life. And I think, maybe what we're trying to do here is to simply give a different perspective that is somehow controversial. But just to, say that it's very difficult work. It's non-trivial to figure out how you feel about something. Yeah. Non-trivial.
Yeah. That's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of work to disentangle your true inherent feelings from what you're told how you should feel. That's difficult work. And then once you've done that and you have a strong sense and you're reconnected to that quiet inner voice, the next part from there is, do you want to live in accordance with that voice? I can now hear it. I've cultivated a connection to my inner self. I understand what I want to do from a self-driven perspective. Now, am I going to do that? I think in my case, I don't have a choice. It's so loud. That voice, now that I've cultivated a connection to that voice, it's so difficult for me to act contrary to it. I find it very, very difficult. So I don't have a choice. I just have to. But I can also see the side of like, maybe I want to be a good mother, and there are lots of things that I don't want to do in order to be a good mother to support the family. And I think that it's honorable to do what's best for the family rather than what I think is best for myself. I can see that as a way of living. It's interesting. It's like I read this book about talking about the regrets that people have when they're on their deathbed, and one of the most striking stories to me was about a guy. He did everything that he could for his family. He was a very dedicated company man, never really showed any signs of weakness. Always, if he was struggling in some way, would hide that because he thought that that's what a man did. And so now he's on his deathbed and he's kind of confessing all of this to a stranger. He's confessing this to his palliative care specialist. And her advice to him was, you need to tell your kids and your family about how you really feel. And he just said no, like he doesn't want to put them through that. He wants to hide his pain and his struggle from them to protect them from it. So it made me feel like on the one hand, it's like, that's honorable. And actually when I told that story to one of my friends, he said, that's correct. That's what you should do. But from the perspective of the author, the palliative care specialist, she was like, she felt this sadness that, her family, this guy's family never knew who he was. Never saw the true him, even until his death. And he died, in a sense, alone, truly alone. Because he had to take on that pain and that struggle by himself. So, I guess the point I'm trying to make with that story is I don't think there's any way to judge whether or not what he did was correct. He did what he did. He had his beliefs. They led to a certain action and a certain life. And there may be some degree of self-sacrifice that was involved in that, but that was his choice.
Yeah, I feel like it comes down to distilling, as we both, I think, agree, like simplicity is, it has so many benefits. And I think for me, like with these really difficult things to know, trying to keep it simple and distill to like, say, if you value authenticity, well, even like what the Stoics have 4 key values. Is that right?
You mean the 4 cardinal virtues?
Yeah.
It's interesting because that is now associated with Stoicism, but I haven't found that in the ancient writings. I think it's more of a modern thing. But anyway.
So what would you call it then? Just general philosophic values?
Sure. No, but they have become associated with modern Stoicism, and I'm actually a big fan of them. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Cool. Well, no, you'll definitely explain them better to me, and I'll ask you to do that in a second. But I think these are helpful in the sense that
yes,
it's 4. So 4 is not very many. They're well considered.
Yes.
And you could just, it's probably a good exercise to do as a person, to think about these values and perhaps some others, and think which ones deeply do you think matter. And then based on that, it's much easier to then say, okay, well, based on these 4 values, in this case of this man, is he more aligned with those values by talking to his kids about these problems, or by shielding them?
I see.
And I think that, at least for me, that makes things a lot easier, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's like it's a world with infinite possibilities. You can do infinite number of things, but I feel like this is the most considered I could be, at least about, it helps me make these decisions. Yeah.
He might have had a simple precept, which was family comes first.
Yeah.
And, that's what led to those actions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my attraction to the 4 cardinal virtues, it was simplicity as well. And maybe I should just say what they are, so that we're not in.
Sorry, I'm not dancing around. I know Nick will do a much better job of explaining it, so go ahead.
But I'll just say what they are. I don't know if we want to go into it too much. I mean, we can, whatever. But so they're wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance or discipline. And the reason that I was attracted to them is because, as Lockie said, they're simple. And what I found is that, I went through a long period of exploration of trying to figure out, quote unquote, the answers to life. And that led me on a journey of, studying philosophy, Western and Eastern philosophy, psychology, a bunch of things. And what I found at the end of that was like, I was just more confused. I mean, I definitely had a richer perspective, but it's interesting, man. When I went to study philosophy, I found that a lot of people became nihilists. Like they had just had, it was so difficult for them to figure out how to act and what to do. When you're questioning everything, including society, and being like, well, I don't want to be a capitalist. So now how am I going to get a job, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's so difficult to live in a world in which you're, questioning everything. I'm not saying that you shouldn't question, but I didn't see that after studying philosophy, people became happier or more certain. In fact, I found the total opposite. Yeah. And I found that a lot of friends went into a kind of like plunged into a kind of a deep depression. And
these were philosophy majors
at
uni, right? Yeah.
Some of them were like, fuck this, I'm getting out of philosophy. And I know at least one friend went into finance, which I don't know if that was the best. But
I remember, I think you said one of your philosophy lecturers, didn't they say to you, like, they kind of warned you in a way?
All of them. So, I mean, so let me just go into that story briefly, which is that, before I studied philosophy, I was a professional scientist. I had a good career as a scientist, and then I decided, like, this is really interesting, so I want to delve into it more.
Interesting and important, right?
Interesting, and that's a very good point, because I felt like, what am I doing all these experiments for when I don't know how to live? Let me just read imbibe the best thoughts from the best thinkers on how to live. That was my goal with studying philosophy.
So even then you were aware of intentionality in that sense. You were trying to make sure that you were directing your energy in the most considered way.
Yeah, no, exactly. It was like, how do I be the most considered?
Yeah.
And that's what, Socrates is supposed to have said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So that's why I went to study. So I'll say 2 things about that. First of all, as you said, everybody discouraged me. So I went to Sydney University because it's a great place to study philosophy, and asked these philosophy professors if I should study philosophy. And unanimously, they were like, what are you doing? You got a great career. Definitely don't study philosophy. And all of them talked about how it's not really, it's not going to be able to get a job. But also they talked about how there was such a malaise around, these people are interested in the deepest questions of existence, time, identity, ethics, beauty, the structure of reality. And they talked about how, competencies and graduate outcomes had like seeped into philosophy, and now you have to do teamwork in philosophy and give group presentations just because that's a good graduate attribute. But it's like, that has nothing to do with, I don't think Wittgenstein or any of the great philosophers were doing a lot of teamwork. So that was the first thing. And then the second thing is that unfortunately, what I had found in studying philosophy is that, there has been a turn to what is maybe these days called analytic philosophy, interests in things like, formal logic, in things like rationality, truth, the philosophy of language, the philosophy of meaning, those kinds of things. And for me, I was much more interested in I want to know how to live. The fuck are we...
Like applicable.
Yeah, like that's why I was so attracted in the end to the Stoics, because they're very practical of like, this is how to live. And one day we'll talk about, there's a book called A Guide to the Great Life. We'll talk about that at some point, because he talks about the difference between philosophers and philosophizers. Philosophers are people that, you know, like Aristotle, Plato, like they want to know how to live. Yeah. So that's why they philosophize. And
then act upon.
You know, they live in accordance with it. And philosophizers are people that just talk about philosophy, which unfortunately is what happens when you go to when you study philosophy. And I got good at writing essays, but I didn't necessarily come out with like a new perspective on life. And an example of this, man, I don't know if we've talked about this, but like in my first philosophy class, we were talking about what Aristotle calls the golden mean. So he says that, you know, on the one extreme, you might be a coward. And on the other extreme, you might be very brash and just go into a situation without thinking. The golden mean between those is courage and bravery, and that's the virtue. So he does this analysis of like going between two extremes and then being like the golden mean, you know, that's... And so I basically, in the break, it was a 2-hour lecture, so in between there was a 10-minute break, and I basically asked in the break to the lecturer, you know, why are we aiming for the golden mean? You know, this seems like... it seems like... It is just a consequence of the Greek obsession with geometry, and now we're bringing that into ethics. I mean,
so do you mean like the term golden mean?
The term golden mean, but also like that we're using geometry as we're using the middle point between two extremes to figure out what the virtue is. Yeah. And I said, why is that? I mean, you know, isn't it possible that, you know, that actually the virtue is maybe on one end, is not just in the middle? And is this a proof? Like, why do they think that you can use geometric proofs in ethics? And the lecturer said, that's a very good critique of Aristotelian virtue ethics. You should write about that. And I was like, you motherfucker, I want to know how to live. Yeah. I don't want to write about it.
That is freaking hilarious.
So that characterizes what happened. Now, I will say that it was a hell of a fun time. It was one of the most fun times of my life. Studying philosophy and pure math. I would definitely not trade it in for anything. One of the best times in my life. But what I found is that most of my philosophical education happened outside of the classroom. Most of the most important books that I read in philosophy were not studying philosophy as a philosophy major. We didn't study any Stoicism, which was a shame.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's actually not, like, in academic philosophy, Stoicism is not that popular.
So when you say that, you mean you didn't study Seneca?
Nope.
Marcus Aurelius?
Nope.
Wow.
Well, Seneca and Marcus Aurelius weren't even mentioned.
Jeez.
No, so I had for a look.
I mean, I am ignorant. I haven't studied like a lot of. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of philosophy I haven't been aware of. So maybe I'm not the best, but that seems like a really big miss. Like,
I think so too. And I, for a little while, thought about writing a PhD in philosophy, and it would have been on Stoicism. And the reason that I didn't end up writing that PhD is because I thought about my philosophical heroes, and they would have been like, what the fuck are you doing? I told you what to do. Yeah. It's very simple, man. Yeah. I gave you the rules. Go and be useful.
Yeah. It could be useful if you do a PhD that enlightens people. Right?
Maybe, but I thought, no, it's true. And I actually had thought about that and maybe like bringing it out to the masses. But I feel that there are people that are doing that, you know, Ryan Holiday, Tim Ferriss. There are lots of people that are bringing Stoicism to the masses. And I felt that working on image-guided radiotherapy, potentially more useful. Yeah. So it was an interesting journey for me. But what I discovered is that while it is very beautiful to have all these theories about, you know, how to live and how to view the world, in the end, what I discovered is that, you know, I don't necessarily think that having kind of a richer view on life actually makes you any more happy or any more useful. And, you know, as an example of this, you know, my grandfather, who is a devout Christian, is, you know, one of the happiest and nicest people that I know. And I look up to him a lot. And he, you know, has devoted himself to one book. And in fact, this year, I believe that he's devoting himself to just the Psalms and just trying to understand them. And he's such a nice person and very happy, very healthy, you know. And it made me realize that potentially, like, zeroing in on something and just being like, this is good enough, and I'm now gonna live in accordance with it, is better than, you know, never having a principle or never having something that you can kind of depend on. Just choosing, okay, the 4 cardinal virtues, bang, wisdom, courage, justice, discipline. Those are good enough.
Yeah.
And just living, and my thought was, if I can even get close to embodying those things, it'd be better than where I am now. And what a great life it would be if I'm able to embody those things in some way. So almost like an 80-20 analysis of being like, that's good enough.
Yeah. Otherwise you get overwhelmed with, and then you'll have inaction, right?
Yeah, we talked about this in the last podcast about how, for me, at least for me, it's like if I get too many inputs, it's an impediment to action. Yeah.
I'm sure for anyone, man. Like,
yeah,
you can overanalyze anything.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good you're trying to take in more, consider more options and take in more information. But at a certain point, it's overwhelming and way too time consuming and ultimately stifling. So, yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And also you can choose these 4 cardinal virtues to live by, and then upon reflection make a change. That's also,
totally.
It's not like with everything you can always change, but I would say that's more likely to be a good way to go about it than to maybe spend 20 years trying to figure out what these things are in the first place, Although at the same time, man, it's like one of the things that I discovered in studying philosophy is that it's just really fun to try and figure out what the answers are. Yeah. And to basically like enjoy the process of thinking about what it's like to live a good life. And then I was like, oh, maybe that is the point of it all, is to just ask questions and to keep experimenting and to enjoy the process of figuring out what it is. And I also think that it kind of changes as you get older and the world changes around you. Yeah. You're going to have different... And for instance, one of the things that I discovered after getting my degree in philosophy is that, we call it a philosophy degree, but really it's a degree in the history of Western philosophy. So I felt that there was a huge gap in my knowledge of not taking Eastern philosophy more seriously. And once I had done that and read some Taoism, read some Buddhism, and and the cool thing about Buddhism is that it actually tells you what to do. Like is what's called an 8-fold noble path, and it tells you these are the things that you should go for. So I found that actually in Eastern philosophy was more practical, but for me, having this juxtaposition of East and West, and for a long time I had portraits of Socrates and the Buddha, side by side, and being like, what can we learn at the synthesis of each of these? That having that kind of balanced perspective of, and as you know, I was gonna at one point get these tattooed on my arm of are you still thinking about that?
Yeah, but the thing about the tattoos is that, often people have regrets about tattoos. Yeah. That's first of all. Yeah. Second of all, I think that there is an arrogance in saying this is how, I just think that I'm likely to change my mind. And I think that there's a certain arrogance in being like, this is the answer.
Yeah. I think that's so important to always have that humbleness or whatever it is to change your mind. Yeah. And not make yourself feel completely obligated. Unless it's marriage, also, then you're committed. No.
Yes. Sometimes not. But I also think it's dogmatic, to have something on you like, this is how I'm going to live now. It's dogmatic. Also, another thing is it's getting a tattoo is somewhat of a display. You can get a tattoo just for you, but you are then exhibiting it to the world. Yeah. And, I'm not interested in doing that. It's,
So are you still, it's an idea or you're
it's an idea, but I wouldn't say that I'm, finally not going to do that. Yeah. But anyway, these things are important enough for me that I thought I should get them tattooed. And I have a cousin who actually did a very similar thing of he got his morning routine tattooed on his arm of basically this is these are the things that I need.
That's cool.
It is very cool. But so I was going to have on the left hand side the 4 cardinal virtues, and on the right hand side something that breaks that, something antithetical to that. For a long time I was going to have a surprised emoji face, as you know. Yeah. For a little while I was going to have the symbol for Om.
What about the
in Sanskrit
dinosaur with hearts in its eyes?
Yeah, you see,
that would be pretty
something
good.
Ridiculous. Yeah. Yeah, because the
You
Syrian.
just get that anyway, did
I could, yeah. I thought about getting a temporary tattoo or something just
Okay.
to see how it's like. But
Yeah.
yeah. So for me, like that conflict of like, or what's at the synthesis between seriousness and silliness? What is the synthesis of Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy?
Terry Crews. Yes.
Yeah, Terry Crews. Yeah. Ridiculous.
What is it? Seneca, Buddha, and Terry.
Yeah. And I actually like the idea of living what's called like maybe like less of a theory laden life. It's interesting to me now that like not having anything, there's something in that of like, what's here now, just observe what's here now, like not putting a theory on it, not confining it, just observing what's here now, and then listening to the inner voice within without judgment and without thinking that you have the answer. There is something in that. So that's what I'm more doing now.
Nice. That's cool. As Nick is saying that, his face is lighting up. It's really cool. Yeah, it's awesome. One thought I had was, well, firstly, what did you say to that philosophy lecturer when they gave you that?
I didn't say anything. I was like, I was so disappointed. I was like,
so you just
fuck.
walked off?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I walked off.
That's funny. And I also think the fact that you were asking that question, I'm sure you did really well in that class, right?
Yeah.
You got good marks?
Yeah.
Going back to what we spoke about in the last podcast about curiosity, because you were curious about the subject matter and you weren't just learning it because you needed to learn it for to pass, that way you got a much deeper understanding of everything, and it leads to you questioning like that, which would have been great if they actually engaged with that and actually analyzed it with you. Also on that, have you had any thoughts since? Because I really like the golden mean. I think that's helped me a lot in the sense where I'm a pretty extreme person. So
yeah,
if I know I want to do that thing, I get excited by like, well, I'm going to do it to like 100%.
Yeah. And
then I've realized with some things, probably a lot of things, like I think the midpoint or that the perfect medium is really often a virtue.
Yep.
And I also because I've had all these thoughts. It's a bit chaotic as I'm saying this, but I was even thinking like Nazism and Hitler and that. Everyone should read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. It's funny I say that I haven't read it in full, but I found that it's really interesting to see how that arose, and I feel like it stemmed from having a particular value, being very strongly leaning that way. So, and then that going way too far, and like a more example of my life would be, say I really want to get stronger and strength training is important, and I'm gonna go crazy with that and have really intense workouts. Of course, you could just go too much and injure yourself, or you could go so hard and make it so important that you neglect so many other parts of your life, which in turn actually makes you not as strong. Maybe you know what I mean? Like there's certain things you need obviously to live. I thought, even though I love extremes and I still want to keep doing that, the golden mean was helpful for me to sometimes maybe have more perspective. Oh no, like that's a bit much. Let's bring that in a little bit. So what you don't? What are your thoughts on that now?
I guess I'm undecided. It's funny because at some point we should talk about balance and moderation.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I'm a fan.
Very interesting. That'd be great.
I don't think I'm a fan. I think maybe what I'm more aiming for is harmony, where you add things together and then you get a synergistic effect, rather than this idea that you compromise by subtracting. Not a fan of that. I mean, again, it's just like there's certain ways of living, but the people that I look to up to are quite extreme, and they're unapologetic about being extreme. One of the things that I liked in reading Aristotle was this idea that, like, if you're on one end of the spectrum and you aim for the other end, you're going to miss. So, for instance, if you're a coward and you aim to be brave, you're going to do what a coward thinks is bravery. So,
which is still cowardly.
It still misses. It's not the golden mean yet.
Yeah.
It still misses the mark.
And
so
it's somehow inauthentic as well, perhaps. I don't know.
Well, I don't know.
That's a noble thing to do if you were a coward trying to not be so.
Yeah, it might be noble, yeah. But what I discovered is that actually, like, sometimes that's why it's good to overshoot. Because if you're on one extreme and you undershoot, then you might not even know it.
True.
And you might never get to bravery if you're a coward.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to sometimes, if you're a coward, act brashly and see what happens, because that might actually be further towards bravery.
Love it.
So I actually like going the other extreme and seeing what it's like. As you know, I've been incredibly introverted and incredibly extroverted.
Yeah.
And so now that I understand what it's like to be somebody that goes in a cave for 8 months and also can go up to strangers on the bus and talk to them about their lives.
Yeah.
Now I understand what the full spectrum of introversion and extroversion actually looks like.
Yeah. Just a side note on that, Nick went through a period where he tried to have deep conversations with complete strangers.
I did.
And every day, pretty much?
It was a daily
at least
goal.
once a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Epic. So cool. We can talk about that later.
Sure.
Continue, man.
But so yeah, one of the things that I loved in reading Aristotle was like this idea that, like, for me, he doesn't explicitly say this, but for me, it's like, in order to get an understanding of what the extremes are, you have to go to both of them, and then you can make an educated decision as to where you'd like to fit in the spectrum. Again, I don't actually think that the golden mean. It's like what comes to mind is, like, on your sound system, you kind of have these equalizers that you can, put. Maybe sometimes you want a bit more bass. There's nothing wrong with wanting more bass. And so I don't think that the equalizers need to be in the middle every time.
Yeah.
And I think...
I agree with that. It depending on the situation, what it is, you might modify it. Yeah.
So I've come to think that, first of all, it's kind of person specific. So I don't believe in the golden mean. I think that it's an interesting way to think about what the virtue is between two extremes. I think if you want to be extreme, that's your prerogative. And also, it's going to be person specific, but then even within a person, it's going to be time specific. I was much more extroverted as a kid than I am now.
Yeah. And even situation specific.
Exactly. Yeah. So one other thing that we should talk about at some point is, like, so Harvard psychologist called, I think his name is Brian Little, talks about how authenticity is a myth. That there's this idea that you're one person and that you need to be, if you're not that one person in all contexts, then you're being inauthentic. But that actually just flies in the face of the fact that humans are incredibly rich, diverse, adaptable. It makes sense that you would act differently at a funeral than you would at a party. It makes sense that you would act differently around your grandmother than you would around a first date, or a first date around the 50th date. It makes sense that you would express who you are in different contexts in different ways. So that has allowed me to let go of the idea that you need to be one thing. I think it's very constricting to be like, this is who I am and I'm just going to be that all the time. So when I talk about authenticity, what I'm more talking about is listening to that kind of internal voice of what it says in the circumstances. So the authenticity is listening to your interior life. It has nothing to do with how that manifests, or less to do with that, So
that's so cool, because it's also then, in a sense, someone else's authenticity is a mystery. You can't really know.
Exactly. Even your own. It's a mystery to you.
Yeah, exactly. But the cool thing is, I feel like you can sense it when someone's authentic.
You can.
And I
think so.
Deeply enjoy it and like it.
I think that people can tell when you're not being authentic, and I think that it's a huge turn off. So with Aristotle,
and it's like subconscious, right? You can just sense. Yeah,
it's so important to because we're social creatures, and it's very important to figure out where this fucking person's coming from, One of the things that I didn't, and one day we'll talk about Aristotle, and I'll bring some quotes.
That'd be awesome. I look forward to that.
From his book. But one of the things that I didn't like is he kind of just lists these virtues out as like these are the virtues, and I'm like, well, where'd you get these fucking virtues? Like, and one of the things that was really cool was one of the things that was really cool for me is that when I came to study philosophy was at the time of the rise of positive psychology. And so it was really cool to see that some of these claims that had been made in ancient times were actually being tested in like scientifically. It was so cool. And I just felt that I was living in this fucking wonderful golden period of like, let's see what, because for instance, in Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's book Flow, he actually begins by negating Aristotle, which is so cool because I had read the Nicomachean Ethics and then I read Flow. And these books are separated by 2 millennia, and it's so cool to see how things have developed since then. So, there are downsides to Aristotle's conception of virtue ethics.
Is the Nicomachean Ethics in The Prince? Or is it?
The Prince?
Oh, no, I'm thinking Machiavelli.
That's Machiavelli.
Yeah. Can you enlighten me briefly on that?
The Nicomachean Ethics?
Yeah.
So he's supposed to have written a book for his son, Nicomachus, to how to live. So it is gorgeous, man, because
based on Aristotle or completely?
So the Nicomachean Ethics was written by Aristotle.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting confused. Yeah.
It's not Niccolo Machiavelli.
Yeah.
That's many, many years later.
Yeah.
So the Nicomachean Ethics was written for Nicomachus, his son. Aristotle's son.
Okay.
And was supposed to have been. And it's like a book on how to live, which is like so fucking cool because it's like you feel like you're Aristotle's son when you're reading it.
Yeah. Kind of like Seneca's letters to Lucilius.
Exactly, like these personal accounts, like Marcus Aurelius, when he wrote the Meditations, they were his personal journal. He would be horrified if he knew that, so many people know his personal diary.
Yeah.
So like,
isn't that cool though? Because that almost goes back to the anonymity thing.
Absolutely.
He'd be horrified, but everyone loves him.
Everybody loves him.
Because he's so authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, hey? Like, letting people in, I'd say, is probably often a really actually... Yeah, your fears are... I don't know why they're there. It's natural, but there's no need. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so it's a beautiful... That book really changed my life, the Nicomachean Ethics. Yeah, unfortunately, man, so we lost most of Aristotle's writings. So it was a huge shame.
It's crazy to think that.
And so what we have access to are his lecture notes, and those... Just imagine we had the book. I mean, lecture notes compared to an intentionally written book is very different. So what we're getting is just scratching the surface of what he had to say, and it's super amazing anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll go into the Nicomachean Ethics one day more.
Am I right in saying that's I'm happy to seem ignorant, because a lot of these things I've read through, but I'm a bit fuzzy on at the moment. It's relatively short, is it?
Yeah, I mean 200 pages, something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's bigger than I was thinking. Yeah. Anyway, cool.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. I feel when I read Aristotle and I understand it, he's very understandable. Aristotle is supposed to have said, "Think like a philosopher, but speak like the common person," and I found it such a thrill to read Aristotle because it's incredibly accessible. Again, it's from 2,000 years ago. It's to his son. It's very direct of like, this is how you should live. Like, he's answering these, in my opinion, important questions. He's clearly a genius. And I found that as I was imbibing Aristotle, I started to begin to think like him. It's so funny. But that just happens sometimes. When you read somebody, you start to think like that person. So it was very important for me to read him.
Yeah. What did his son end up doing?
I don't know. Yeah. So there was actually an interesting lineage.
That's a great foundation. There you go, mate.
No, but the thing is, like, sometimes the sons of great men don't always become great men.
Well, but even he could have been a great man, and we don't need to know about that, right? Like,
sure. I understand what you're saying.
A lot of great people that historically are not. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, just to say there is a lineage here, which is really cool that most people know, but some people might not know, which is that, so Socrates was the teacher of Plato. Plato was the teacher of Aristotle, and Aristotle was the teacher of Alexander the Great. So there's this incredible lineage of just some of the most important people in history. Forget about the history of Greece.
That's very impressive.
In world history, that it's 4 generations of teachers starting from Socrates.
And it's fascinating that all stems from a way of thinking. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That is the value in learning these things or reading them. Man, you know what's funny? I was thinking the subject today is death, is it not?
Yes.
I don't know if we said that at all.
I mean, it does.
We were hoping you'd figure it out, everyone.
Well, the book that I opened with was I talked about death in the beginning of how I think that's, well, not I think, but Ernest Becker says that is your primary motivator, subconsciously.
Yeah. No, it's cool. I'm just saying we didn't know. Yeah. It's also cool, like, I think most people, if you say we're going to talk about death, oh, that's depressing and down. I haven't felt like this has been in fact, it's been a fun, enlightening, exciting conversation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's cultural or whatever. I was actually trying to look for instances of cultures where they celebrate death. I know in the Mexican culture, they have the Dia de los Muertos, where I don't know if that's celebrating death, but and then in Buddhist culture, there's this idea of reincarnation. So it's not actually final. I was just thinking for myself why it is that we have negative connotations of death. And, I think one of the things is just that there's uncertainty on the other side. And it's terrifying to think about what's on the other side. I think for me, there is the conception that there's something on the other side is just not correct. I don't, it's like, do you remember what happened before you were born? It's going to be exactly like that, where you didn't exist, That's my opinion about it. So that, I have less terror about it, but I also feel that sometimes I think the terror in terms of thinking about your own death is that you feel that you haven't done everything that you are supposed to do on this earth. So I can imagine that if you kind of are raising a family and you want to be around for your kids, that would be quite terrifying, that, you don't want to leave them behind or whatever. But then regardless of, aside from that, is there a reason that, let's say that, everybody would be taken care of. You don't have to worry about that. Why is there a fear of death other than, the impact that you would have on the people that you leave behind? And I often think there is, so I wonder where that kind of comes from. I think for me, it's like I would have felt regret had I not lived kind of authentically, done all the things that I wanted to do. If I'd gone to med school and become a doctor and been a dutiful son, I think that I probably would have felt, I don't want to die now. I haven't lived yet. And so now that I feel that I'm living, I feel that it's fine. I'm not afraid of death in itself. I'm afraid of pain. Pain is not good. I don't want to die painfully, but the idea of not existing anymore is not terrifying to me at all. What about you, man?
Especially because you'll be unaware of it anyway.
It doesn't even make sense. Yeah.
Were you saying as well, you're questioning why we have, death is a sad...
Yeah.
My thought on that was just, maybe it's more selfish, but if someone dies, you miss them, and that's a sad emotion, right?
Okay.
So, I think that's...
I mean, I had a close friend die, and when he died, I felt gratitude, because I was so glad that we had met, and every time that we met up, we would have these 3-hour-long, 4-hour-long, 5-hour-long conversations. We did exactly what we wanted to do. And so I think I have that lens anyway. In Stoicism, I think it's called premeditatio malorum, where it's the premeditation of evils. That death is coming. So just think about, in the worst case scenario, what that would be like, and then live in accordance with that, so that you don't have any regrets.
Is that also referred to as negative visualization?
Negative visualization, yeah. So I've done that with you many times, of like, if Lockie were to die, would I have any regrets? And sorry to say that I don't. Like, I would obviously...
That's kind of cool, actually. I'm glad.
Yeah, no, because I say no when I mean no to you. And when I want to do something with you, I just go, even if Lockie says no to this, it's what I want to do. So I'm just going to ask him. And I say I love you. I don't have any hang-ups about that. And there's nothing left unsaid between us. And if I feel that there was, I would just say it. Yeah. I don't want to wait and be regretful when you die. So I have that thing in my head of like, when we meet up, I hug you. It's not a mistake, because it might be that I never see you again. So I live in accordance with that. And as you know, I'm like, no, I'm not going to go to that fucking meeting. I might die. So death to me is this incredible motivator to me, it's just the fact of the matter. It's not sad because it's part and parcel of living. You can't stay awake forever, and you also can't stay alive forever. It's just, that's just the fact of the matter. If you try and deny it, you'll, as Ernest Becker says, you'll live in accordance with illusionary social games. And I don't want to do that. So for me, death is an incredible teacher. It's part and parcel of the reality of being a finite human being, being a finite mammal. And I find that when I think in accordance with it, it like puts everything in perspective of like, I don't want to say that thing because then he might think weirdly of me, or I don't want to do that because it might be embarrassing. You're going to die, bro. The fuck are you talking about?
I might use that next time I'm training and there's someone that's like scared of doing a skill. Look, mate, you're going to die anyway.
Well, he might injure himself. I don't know about that one.
No, yeah. So then you at a funeral, how would you conduct yourself? Because I'm supposing, based on your the way you've considered this, you may be less upset than the average person at a funeral.
I mean, I was like when I went to this funeral. What was nice about this funeral for my close friend was that it was a very small gathering. There were probably like 10 of us. Only 2 people spoke. I spoke, and then I think his son spoke. And it was funny because we talked about him as if he was still there. Like, he would absolutely hate that we're doing this. He wouldn't want us to make a fuss. And he wouldn't want us to be talking about him like this because he's a very humble person. And so we spoke about him as if he was still there, and we all just told great stories about our relationship with him. And I don't think anybody cried really. It was very intimate. I really liked it because I've been to funerals before where it's like 100 people, and it's like most of those people are acquaintances. Let's be honest. Most of those people are not close friends. So I don't know. In those situations, it feels a little bit disconnected. And so I'm more solemn just because I don't want to be disrespectful to the people that are at the funeral. So I'm more solemn to be respectful. But in that case, where it was like I was one of the guy's closest friends, and it was a small gathering, I wouldn't say that we were happy, but I would say that we were all grateful. And there's a nice thing that happens in the air when, I don't know, we all felt great love for this person who was living an authentic life. He was in his like late 50s, but he studied philosophy with me.
Oh wow, that's young.
He died of a heart attack. So he was living an authentic life. Like, he wanted to study philosophy, and we talked about philosophy and mathematics and computer science, and he was doing exactly what he wanted to do. And in our relationship, we said exactly what we wanted to say and did exactly what we wanted to do. So every time we met up was such a gift. That's maybe another way of thinking about it, is like, you know, the conversation that we're having now, if you didn't have, if I die and you don't have the opportunity to do more of them, it's not as if you lost anything. You gained something by, and I have too, by our friendship.
And every additional one is a gift.
That's how I look at it.
It's not expected.
It's not, the other way to look at it is like, I thought I was going to have 100 and I only got 80. So, the universe took 20 away from me. So the way that I think about it is that, you're not owed anything.
Yeah.
You start from zero.
Yeah.
And every one that you get is a bonus.
I love that. I think that's really important. I had that epiphany that you're not owed anything.
Yep.
Because I think especially as like privileged kids in Australia, you can... I can understand how you might think, it probably even happens that naturally as you figure things out, you think you're entitled to certain things. And then when you don't get those things, it's difficult.
Yeah.
But then ideally you learn you're entitled to nothing. And that's maybe it's a difficult pill to swallow, but it's very liberating. And then it makes you appreciate everything that you manage to, that comes your way. And then to the deepest point, every day you get to spend with a friend.
Yeah, you can look at everything that way. Every breath.
Yeah.
Every time you look out the window and see the sun, every moment like that could be your last. Huh.
Yeah. I've been loving, more and more so, man, just the natural surrounds. It's funny, I so often see something beautiful, even just like last night, the sunset. Stunning, like golden clouds, orange skyline, and I sometimes have that feeling like I want to take a photo of this because it's beautiful, but there's been so many beautiful natural moments that you can't take photos of them all, you know what I mean? So isn't the world stunning though? Even the fact that we have a moon, I was thinking it's so cool that we have a moon. Not every planet would have one. What is it? Is it Neptune has 4 or something like that?
I don't remember, but yeah.
Anyway, there's some lucky planets with multiples.
Yeah.
And then in Star Wars, there's that one with the double moon.
Yeah, that's cool.
But I was just thinking, it's cool that we even have one because it's just awesome to look at, and it changes depending on cycle. Yeah,
causes the tides.
Yeah, it's just that's something I'm thankful for. It's because it's just cool, I can imagine a world without a moon. For example, I don't think it would, but it would be missing something we didn't even know we could have, if you know what I mean. I think that's key to happiness is not having entitlement.
Not taking things for granted.
Yeah.
Because then, as you said, when you don't get it, you feel that you're owed something.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good place to wrap up, I think.
I think so, man.
Given the quote that you want to make, right?
Yeah, that's it.
You want to finish off on?
Yeah, so this is from Sam Harris, and just I think he says it really well. So for anyone out there, you can look into this further. Sam Harris. You've got this next interaction with another human being to make the world a marginally better place.